He asked me, can you convert 14 meters for me to feet? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it.
So here we have a pretty significant earthquake, 8.9, 9.0. People argue back and forth what the number was. You had 3 plants, units 1, 2, and 3 were operating. Unit 4 was in a refueling outage. The core was completely empty. They've been in refueling for about 120 days. And when the earthquake hit, and the plants themselves responded perfectly from the earthquake itself. All right, and then 45 to 46 minutes later, the onslaught of the tsunami hit the site, and it's pretty devastating. And I'm sure you've seen the pictures. There's one picture that's really impressive. You can see one of the waves hit the turbine building, all right? And the splash from the wave is higher than the reactor building, okay? It's huge. Okay, so it really kind of puts in perspective just how devastating that damage was. Diesel fuel oil storage tanks out in the ocean, the whole intake structure basically gone, surf water systems, service water systems, all your essential systems that you need to safe shut down the plant. Core spray, RHR, residual heat removal system, these are the low pressure safety injection systems or emergency core cooling systems, whatever you want to call them, they're all underwater. They're all flooded in the corners. The diesels are underwater. Okay, complete loss of all AC power. Batteries, DC buses, washed out, no DC buses. The operators are out in the parking lot getting batteries out of cars, bringing them to the control room, hooking up the instruments to try and get an understanding of where the plant is at. So just kind of visualize this. Never mind the fact that who knows what's going on with their families, all right, with their homes, and you know the devastation that was there. So it's a pretty significant event for our industry, all right. But regardless, it should never have happened, all right. The plant should have been designed and to be able to withstand that kind of onslaught of the tsunami. And that's the thing that we have to learn in our industry right now. So I'm on what we call a Fukushima Way Forward Steering Committee. It's a domestic committee that we're looking at, one, understanding in detail what happened over there. I mean, we have the high-level stuff, like I just said, but I want to understand what were the operators' decisions. What did they do when they did it? For example, on Unit 1 is a BWR, boiling water reactor, GE Mark 1 containment, BWR3, that has an isolation condenser. You guys ever hear isolation condenser? Okay, it's like an emergency cooling system. It's a passive system with a couple of valves that you have to open and basically gravity feeds to help cool down that plant. Between the earthquake and the tsunami, they had excessive cool down on the reactor. They were concerned about that. So what did they do? They isolated the isolation condenser. Should never have done that. Our procedures wouldn't have allowed that. Our procedures would require you to take one of the trains out, not both trains of the isolation condenser. That's why if you look at the timeline, you'll see that they had core melt on Unit 1 that started approximately 4 hours after the tsunami hit. Right. Now, they still would have had core melt on Unit 1 because of loss of all AC power and not being able to get high pressure injection or some source of water into that reactor soon enough. Today we believe that Unit 1 is 100% core melt, and we're pretty confident that Unit 2 and 3 is north of 50%, probably 100% core melt on both of those units. And then you guys also, you see the pictures of the hydrogen explosions that occurred there. That's another thing that we're really trying to understand. Did they have hardened vents? Hardened vents is a design that you bypass standby gas trains, you bypass your filter system, and then you basically take containment pressure and you vent it right out the stack. Okay, it's supposed to be pretty much a passive system. All right, what happened there? All right, well, no power valves, their valves were closed. Blowout panels that we're talking about that's supposed to rupture. We're still trying to get into that information. So, when we had 3 Mile Island, we put in place a lot of initiatives. I can't even begin to tell you things like site-specific simulators occurred after 3 Mile Island. Right? Tremendous amount of training for our operators. Emergency operating procedures. It's a symptom-based procedure, thought process. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do that. All those issues were put out during 3 Mile Island. And the big one that was put in place was an Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, INPO. Right? And it's an industry, like an independent regulator, that their sole purpose is to come to each one of our plants on a periodicity of 18 months to 2 years and do a 2-week evaluation of our plant's performance. And they come in and look at our EOD, look at our training. Right? These were all put in as a result of 3 Mile Island. And these things did roll out into the other countries, but not to the same detail that we have. We're trying to understand the differences between those and what we have. So that steering committee that we're on right now is working on understanding in detail what happened in the timeline that occurred over in Fukushima. It's very, very difficult to get information out of Japan. Very, very difficult. But we've been working with TEPCO, we've been working with the Japanese government, and we've got the timeline, we've got the sequence of events. The difficult part is the organizational behaviors. There's a different culture, right? And it's hard to talk about because we certainly don't want to throw them under the bus, so to speak, but we got to learn from this. You know, very difficult for the Japanese people to identify a problem and bring it up to somebody. It's just culturally very hard for them to do that. You know, I'm on this other commission, the WANO Commission. Now, let me talk a little bit about WANO. That's the World Association. So we had info from 3 Mile Island, and then what happened? WANO, we had Chernobyl, so then we said we can't ever have this happen again in the world. So we developed an organization called WANO, the World Association. It's basically similar to INPO in that they're supposed to go out to all the power plants in the world, 460-something of them, and do these types of evaluations like they do with ours. So we now fast forward and we have Fukushima. And so what's the thing you got to ask yourself?
With WANO and after Chernobyl, we never actually thought about tsunami hitting these things right on the shore in a country where tsunami was named.
Yeah, no, and that's the issue that's the biggest issue right now that we're struggling with is the Japanese understood that they had vulnerabilities there with not only the seismic event, but with the tsunami. And they had enough data to show, but again, it's all about probabilistic, PRA type of things. And, you know, I talked to them, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Dr. Papadakis, an MIT grad that he's one of the commissioners at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission right now. His numbers he gave me just 2 days ago was anywhere between 1 in 1,000 years to 1 in 70 years. The probabilistic risk that you were going to have a tsunami that was going to hit that coastline. And they also knew that their weir wall that they had designed was probably under-designed. Now the question is why didn't WANO and the Japanese regulation push this issue to get it resolved? And it's not just that. There's other issues that are coming out that the WANO organization, for example, and this is something that, you know, it's difficult to talk about because again, we're really struggling with how do you manage this stuff. The Fukushima plants 1, 2, 3, and 4 never had a WANO evaluation in its history. You know, and there are other plants out there that have never had a WANO evaluation. So, okay, what's going on here? So I'm on this commission, and we just completed our report, and I'm going to China here in October, where we will then make a lot of recommendations on what has to be done, and let's hope that the governing board takes those recommendations. But clearly, The Wano charter is that every utility or every nuclear power plant should have had an evaluation at least once every 6 years. That's not acceptable. That's too long. All right? I think the right duration is 2 years, but we've compromised with every 4 years. So now you have to staff the resources in the Wano centers, the Moscow Center, the Tokyo Center, the Paris Center, and in London, to be able to support that kind of an aggressive schedule to do these good evaluations to really be able to see what happened and how you prevent these types of issues. And then it's such a difficult issue here because in the United States it's a utility company, all right. It's my business, all right, and it's important for my business because we are really our brother's keepers. The worst plant out there, if it creates a problem for all of us. But when you're dealing with WAMA, you're not really dealing with utilities as much as you're dealing with governments. And it's pretty hard to tell the Chinese government what to do, okay? It's pretty hard to tell the Russian government what to do. But this commission that we're on, we had representatives from Russia, we had Ukraine, we had France, Japan, China, Korea, pretty much all of the countries represented, and full endorsement of the recommendations of what we have to do to prevent this from happening again. So that, and as we always do, we look at what happened, lessons learned, and how do we make sure that we incorporate those lessons learned into our business. Now, in parallel with all this, we have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission here in the United States that puts their team together and just issued a 90-day report, of which we're now going through their recommendations, some of which were near-term recommendations, and some of which were some long-term recommendations. It's going to have an impact. It's going to have a significant impact on our industry and our business going forward. But we will learn from this, and the industry will be stronger for it. Any questions on Fukushima? Yeah.
Yes. Getting back to the cultural question, if indeed the Japanese, the TEPCO, or the country itself have asked for outside help, and I know the U.S. was anxious to provide it, had they been able to come in, would that have mitigated, perhaps not for Unit 1, but some of the meltdown problems in the other reactors? For example, with emergency power.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I don't think it would have done anything. The damage was so significant, and the preparation to be able to handle that issue. You need to have a lot of this information and this equipment staged and ready to be used. Now, I can tell you right now that there were a lot of difficulty. We were actually getting into trade agreements, arguments about just providing them equipment that they needed in order to be able to combat it. Stupid stuff like even PCs, protective coveralls, TLDs, never mind storage capacity, tanks, diesels. They were calling us up for cabling and pipes and you name it, and having a very difficult time getting through some of the trade agreements. But in all honesty, I would tell you that the fact that they really weren't prepared for. Let me give you an example. This is a lot of detail here, guys, and I apologize, but we had post 9/11, we had what we call Bravo 5 Bravo design. I should say design. Really, it was a regulatory change that we put in place, where we at all of our facilities here in the United States, we have backup pumps, we have backup power supplies, the ability to be able to, God forbid, we get into these beyond design basis events, to be able to combat these issues. That stuff really wasn't staged yet to the level that we have in the United States. Never mind what we call SAMGs, which are a guidance document on how you go, if you're out of the EOPs and you're into the SAMGs, how you go and implement that stuff. But, I would tell you that the devastation is tremendous there. I know people who've been there know that, but they could have been prepared for a better response from the country to be able to help that facility. Any other questions, sir?
It seems to me like the damage to the spent fuel storage pool was kind of a surprise. I mean, in commercial nuclear power, we're usually worried about the reactor. Were you equally surprised about that, the loss of structural integrity on the spent fuel storage pools?
In actuality, all the information we're getting back now, that they actually did not have problems. In fact, and this is why it's so important for us to get the facts. All right? You know, everybody, including Senator Boxer from California, is all worked up now about spent fuel pool, get it out of the pools, put it in dry cask. First of all, we don't have the designs to put it in dry cask. They've typically got to be in the spent fuel pools for 5 to 7 years. Now, I mean, I'm sure Dr. Singh at Holtec would be love to design a cask for us to get them out there. He could, but right now, we have capability. But in their case, like, let me give you an example. Unit 4, okay, that was in a refueling house. There was no fuel in the reactor. Okay, everything was in the spent fuel. So everybody's asking, so how the heck did the damn reactor building blow up? So what was the theory? The theory was that the core got uncovered in the spent fuel pool, hydrogen from a Zerk water reaction to the high temperature, hydrogen buildup inside the reactor building caused the explosion. So everybody made this assumption that spent fuel pool lost its integrity and that they boiled off all the water and that's what happened. Well, that's not what happened. There was nothing wrong with that spent fuel pool. What happened was when they were venting Unit 3, it's a common discharge. Unit 3 and Unit 4 have a common discharge. So when you're venting Unit 3, the check valves that are on Unit 4 leak, and the hydrogen actually backed up into the Unit 4 reactor building. Okay, and that's why you lost Unit 4's reactor building. So that's what we need to understand before we start modifying our facilities here and going down. This is what happened at 3 Mile Island. A lot of great things came out of 3 Mile Island, but we did a lot of things that really afterwards we had to undo because it really wasn't the right thing to do. Because we didn't have all the facts, we needed to get all the facts out before we move over there. A lot of information still coming in on it. The tough part is the organizational behaviors, the command and control. Who's in charge? Who's making the decisions? You know, we got word the Prime Minister sent the word to the plant manager, stop injecting seawater into the reactor because they were worried about the salt water corrosion on the vessel and potential subcritical or criticality as a result of the core melt. Well, the plant manager was smart enough not to do that. You know, he kept the seawater going in there. You know, water's a good thing. You know, we need to have that. Any other questions on Fukushima? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about new nuclear, right?